Okay, so I guess the forums and people are saying that the content's too hard, and I don't know. I have some opinions on it. But before I say anything, I just want to say like everyone's entitled to their opinion. Don't dunk on someone because they like disagree with what you're saying. Because for some people they think it is too hard, and for other people they might think it's too easy. So like, there's a lot of people to play this game, and I try to think of it as someone who does some of the higher end content, that there are a lot of people who will never touch this, and I want to make a game that everyone can play. So that's kind of like my mindset with it. And I actually think where the difficulty stands in Dawntrail is pretty much perfect. It's a lot better than Endwalker, and I'm gonna read this post, and obviously don't send any like hate towards anyone, but like they're just saying the difficulty of the normal content. They're talking about the normal raid content, and they just say, I want to wait to see what the raid tier was before I said anything, and they already post about the dungeons and trial difficulty, and the new normal raid should be thrown into this discussion. And I might repeat points that I've already said, but I really want to like make this point. And people not okay with this difficulty, and they want the devs to hear this. So they say the problem with the difficulty in the normal fights as they see it is the use and abuse of non-standard telegraphs, nasty mechanic overlaps, stuff you would see in normally extremes or harder fights, nasty mechanic, oh I already read that, mechanics resolving too quickly, so the speed of which they resolve, and the mental capacity for the demand to process, and one too many catch this mechs that have you running around like headless chickens, evading randomly like patterns that coming at you. I know what that refers to, but like at the beginning of making this fights, the expansion frustrating and exhausting. The second fight had me wishing that the healer not res me as I was on the floor dead for the 9th time, thinking that I really don't care to want to do this duty. And it's not an issue of learning the fight, because that I can do, but I don't want to do this content alone. You know, I think this is the 4th time I was doing the, what is that, Valgram, when I finally managed to finish it without dying. I think that's the first trial. But the moat point where half the party was already dead half the time. Not knowing the fight doesn't make it any less disheartening experience. And then they talk about JP and how Shadowbringers was and other things. I'm not going to read the rest of that. And my thoughts on this is, especially with the normal rates, especially right now, they are 2 days old. So like not everyone knows everything, and I think that's perfectly fine. Same with the trials. Like I think of it right now as Dawntrail is still relatively young. It's what, 3 weeks? We're on week 3 now, maybe week 4 for early access, but it's like roughly 22 days old. So it's not very old. So with that being said, like, you're not supposed to have it all figured out. A lot of the community, I'm assuming, hasn't even got to the raids yet, and we're already going to complain about the difficulty after 2 days of it. Like, I want to like throw this notion out there that I don't really understand. People think it's like bad to like have to learn something, or bad that they wipe on something or fail at something. Like, it's okay to fail, it's okay to be bad, it's okay to wipe on these things, especially when they're new. Even when they're not new, it's okay to wipe. It's not the end of the world. You're like, your value as a player and a person isn't dependent on if you've never wiped in content before. I wiped at the, what's it called, the 3rd boss of the raid in a static full of ultimate raiders on normal mode. And it was funny, and we had fun with it. None of us were like, oh my god, we wiped. It's normal content. I just kind of wanted the notion of like, it's okay to like fail at things. It's okay to be bad at things. It's okay to have to take longer to learn at things. And I just think the difficulty ramp is a little bit more refreshing than it has been. Just because like I've run a lot of dungeons, I've run a lot of content, just leveling up everything. And I find it a little bit more engaging this time around than it was in Endwalker, because there is this sense of I sort of have to pay attention. It's not as boring, and I kind of like that. On the normal difficulty side, I mean, I sort of agree with like that they're tuned perfectly. I don't want to say agree with the post. I just want to say I agree that they're toned perfectly or tuned perfectly, because if you don't have mechanics like that, the stepping stone and the like progression that there is from like normals to savage is very steep. It is, and even with a weaker raid tier or a raid tier that's supposed to be easier, that step, if they don't have mechanics that are ending up to be faster, or have some nasty overlaps or have some randomness to it, there are going to be these choices where that gap is just too large to jump. And you need to have some place where it is a linear progression where you can start easing people into these. Because if you don't have that, your linear progression ends up being more like stairs. And you just have a step and then you just straight vertical increase to difficulty instead of this gradual increase that people want. So I do think you do need to ease some of these harder mechanics in there. And at the end of the day, like, it's optional content. You can just duty finder it. I don't know anyone who's ever duty failed complete a normal raid. All of mine took under 12 minutes. So if all of my raids are taking under 12 minutes in an instance where you have 60, I do think you're fine. If you start having duty failed of content that is like match made, if that's a way, or party finder or duty finder made, that's when I would start to think that you toned the difficulty too much, where people are failing in the 60-minute allotted time. And I don't think we're anywhere near close to that. I also don't think we need to ramp up anymore. Maybe a tad bit more, but I don't know how you do it just a tad bit more based off of like the information that's given to you. Just because like I don't know what mechanics people are having trouble with. I don't know what things are. I find it fun when people actually, die and it's the boss isn't just a striking dummy, and you do the sense of panic that you get from like running around with the chicken with its head cut off. Like, that's the type of things that I wish the game had a little bit more of. Because like, for example, I've been spamming Agleo to level, and I think back to the difficulty of that. And right now I don't move at all. I don't move for any of the raid wides. I don't move for any of the mechanics that are coming. I'm just it's a rotating dummy that does damage to me. And that's it. Like, I never have to worry about anything being threatening at all. And that ultimately leads to the content being boring. So I think if we had the content not be boring and a little bit more tone difficulty and a little bit, as Yoshi P did say, he wants to bring the stress back to the game a little bit. And he doesn't necessarily mean he wants the game to be stressful, but he just doesn't want the game to be boring. And I think if you go too easy, the game gets boring and stagnant. And that's the only thing he's trying to avoid. I don't think he's trying to punish casual players, or I'm not even going to call you casual players. I'm going to call you players that just don't like hard content, which is fine. Like, I don't like hard content to a lot of things. Final Fantasy is one of the things where I do sort of enjoy it. So, like, but I don't think you necessarily need to bring Savage mechs into normal raids, but I don't think they've done that yet. So we'll see. Those are kind of my thoughts on it. I think they're tuned perfectly. I think it's tuned fine. I do think that maybe some people would disagree with that. Maybe it's the vocal majority that disagree with it, or maybe it's the vocal minority that disagree with it. I don't know yet. We'll see how that plays out over time, but yeah, just some of my thoughts and opinions. But overall, I think it's good. And as always, I hope you have a great day.